Welcome to today's TAFE Talks. I'm Teresa Schmidt, Director of Policy and Governance at TAFE Directors Australia, and today's topic is Seizing the Moment, the Power of TAFE to Lead Australia's Digital and AI Opportunity. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional owners of all the different lands upon which we meet. I'm coming to you from Gubbi Gubbi country, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who might join us in this discussion today. If you'd like to introduce yourself and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that you're on, please feel free to do so in the chat. And I'll say Wanya, welcome to you all. Today, we are discussing an important topic, a generational change in digital and AI capability, which will create a projected shortfall of nearly 250,000 skilled workers across finance, technology and business occupations by 2030. Australia's ability to respond will directly impact national productivity, economic resilience and global competitiveness. We need a workforce which is digitally capable, AI-literate and prepared for continuous reinvention. And while this is a challenge, it is also an opportunity. So in today's session, we will explore the power of TAFE to seize the digital and AI moment to become the national engine room of productivity. So let me begin by introducing ReadyTech, who is one of TDA's valued corporate affiliates and supporting our TAFE Talks today. ReadyTech is a long-standing and trusted partner to the sector. With deep expertise in vocational education and a purpose-built student management platform tailored to the needs of TAFE, ReadyTech continues to work side by side with TAFEs to co-create the future of student success. ReadyTech is also the diamond sponsor of TDA Convention 2026. So thank you, ReadyTech. And joining us from ReadyTech as a moderator for today's session is Chris Smith, Head of Strategy and Innovation. Chris Smith is ReadyTech's resident education technology futurist, acting as a change maker for both the Australian education sector and ReadyTech's teams alike with his advocacy for future readiness through technology. He's the Head of Innovation and Strategy and brings over 10 years' experience facilitating best practice tertiary education and learning through innovation in technology, data, and CX and UX cloud SaaS ecosystem excellence. Chris applies progressive thinking to the way complex education businesses can evolve the student journey and student experiences through technology and tools, as well as how they can maximise the value they receive from tech. I'll now introduce the panel. We have Patrick Kidd, CEO, Future Skills Organisation. Patrick Kidd, OBE, OAM, also known as PK, is the CEO of Future Skills Organisation, where he leads a team focused on harnessing the potential of the education and training system to impact learners and employers in the finance, technology and business sectors. PK has a diverse background in skills training, stakeholder management and leading complex change initiatives. PK's career has spanned major training development and command roles in both the British and Australian Defence Forces before joining Deloitte to advise clients on large-scale transformations. With Deloitte, PK became the CEO of the Invictus Games Sydney 2018, and he has been awarded the Order of the British Empire and the Order of Australia Medal for his service in both countries. In 2023, Patrick became CEO of Future Skills Organisation, and he continues to support initiatives and organisations which enhance the health and wellbeing of veterans and their families. Welcome, PK. We also have Alyssa McKenzie, Head of Education, Design and Operations from Bendigo Kangan Institute. Alyssa is an award-winning education leader and designer with over 20 years' experience in vocational and higher education. Alyssa has led complex teams in public and private sectors to develop and implement innovative learning models and frameworks aligned to industry needs. Alyssa's design experience has included international learning models, micro-credential frameworks, scalable blended learning solutions, industry academy models, teacher capability frameworks, and digital competency approaches. Welcome, Alyssa. And joining Alyssa from Bendigo Kangan Institute is Andrew Roadnight, the Head of Digital Initiatives. Andrew is a widely recognised leader in educational innovation across Australia. As head of digital initiatives, he has overseen the co-design of new qualifications in cloud computing, data analytics, and digital innovation in collaboration with industry leaders, aimed at addressing vital skill shortages in Australia's tech workforce. Andrew's work effectively connects industry and education, making sure that learners are prepared for the future of work. Now, before I hand to Chris to kick us off, I wanted to let you know that today's session is being recorded, and the recording will be made available to everyone who registered for this TAFE Talk session and on the TDO website. Closed captioning is available for this event. If you have any questions that you would like to pose to our speakers today, please use the Q&A box throughout the session and we will come back to those at the end. You can use the chat for discussion amongst yourselves during the session, but we won't be monitoring that chat for questions, so please use the Q&A function for your important questions. And it now gives me great pleasure to hand over to Chris Smith from ReadyTech to kick off today's discussion. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks so much, Teresa. Good afternoon, everyone who's joined today. Thanks for taking the time. I guess I want to start today by just setting the scene. 5 minutes, indulge me. And I want to start on a note of kind of excitement and optimism. I think we've deliberately chosen to frame this session around the opportunity in front of us. And I think while there's lots of talk of disruption and risk and shortfalls, I think what really matters is how we create the right environment for people, especially young people, to succeed. And at its heart, it's not just about technology, it's about people and communities. And I'd actually argue that that's precisely what TAFE is to me. It's about that uplifting of people and their communities. So I think in terms of when we talk about digital capability, because AI is one thing, but digital capability is as important to my mind, even at its most basic level. It's a passport to participation in work, in training, and sort of in life itself, I guess. So when we equip people with those digital skills, we're not just building employability, we're building inclusion, and we're opening doors to for people to kind of connect and contribute and thrive in a future. And this is really important, that will be digital by default. I guess the scale of the challenge is pretty clear. I think Teresa touched on that stat that came out of the FSO research that says by 2030 we're going to be short almost 250,000 skilled professionals in finance, business, and technology alone. So that's outside of every other kind of sector. Just in that FBT sector, with 250,000 skilled professionals short. And we see these numbers, they can be overwhelming. And I guess our job and our role in the discussion today is going to center on how we might sort of address some of that, because it's not just sort of a gap in the labor market. This is like a productivity challenge, and I think it's going to affect the entire economy. It's interesting at the recent sort of productivity roundtable in Canberra that was caught much of the attention in the media last week. I wasn't invited, sadly, but the Treasurer finally declared that AI is now like a national priority. I think one of the key documents that sort of guided that discussion on the day was the JSA's AI capacity study, and just quietly, it does contain a couple of quotes from me, so I was there, sort of in spirit at least. But it's a report that kind of makes the message really clear that if we want to stay competitive globally, we need to move on both AI and digital capability. And it doesn't just mean sort of building advanced skills, it's actually lifting the baseline for everyone. And again, I just think that TAFE and vocational education more broadly is the perfect place to do that. And I'm really serious about this. I think too often digital and AI are talked about almost as if they only belong in universities and research and that sort of world. But as an employer, I can tell you that's not what companies like ours are looking for. We actually need people who can actually apply their skills in real workplaces that solve practical problems and sort of create value from day one. And I think that's why VET is so important in this conversation, because it's applied. It's deeply connected to industry and community. It's designed for work integrated learning. And in fact, I'd argue that's why TAFE is uniquely positioned to lead the response to AI and digital in this sort of opportunity that we're talking about today. To give you a sort of a sense, at ReadyTech, we spent a really long time thinking about our workforce, the composition of skills in our workforce, and how we equip our people with the right skills to succeed in technology. We're thinking a lot about how we identify and source our talent. We're thinking about that in context to digital and specifically AI. And as a technology company, we believe a growing proportion of that talent will come from vocational education. And to sort of formally underline that commitment, we recently signed up to the pledge as part of the New South Wales Digital Skills Compact, which looks to source 20% of our new hires from alternative pathways, and that includes vet. So it's hard for me to be more clear on this. It's my strong view that vocational education is a really large part of our future growth story here in Australia. Today, we're going to explore that, and we're going to talk about how we might seize this moment. And there's people really well qualified to do that. And as I think Teresa may have sort of stolen one of my lines, but I think that concept of TAFE being the engine room of this productivity reset, I think that's a really important sort of thought to keep in mind. In a minute, Patrick PK from the FSO will do his thing, which is to provoke. And I mean that in the best possible sense. Like, entrenched systems need challenging, they need adapting to meet the needs of now. And I haven't met anyone better than PK at that. And then after that, we'll hear from Alyssa and Andrew at BKI on how BKI is innovating its products and services to deliver those same needs of now. And honestly, I think it's a genuinely brilliant story, and one that sort of proves my theory that TAFE can lead and really sort of seize the initiative here in this important opportunity. So with that, PK, I'll hand over to you, and off we go.
Chris, thanks. And just love that word excited. You're excited. I'm really excited because I think almost for the first time in like 2 years of being a jobs and skills council, I think we've got a really tight problem that we can focus on, and I can see how we can line around trying to sort of fix it. And so much of this sector is so complicated and fragmented. It's sort of like it's hard to work out how to like attack something. I'm sorry to use that sort of like that metaphor, but I think at the end of the day, we are in this amazing position to be able to be clear about something that needs to be done. And we have this incredible system, which is the vocational educational training system, which can do it, which is everywhere in our country, rural, urban, has the sort of the ligaments that sort of bind it together, and nothing else has that. And so I really do think that, we are at a sort of a crossroads for vet, and vet can really step in and step up and to almost reinvent itself around this opportunity, the AI opportunity, if we choose to sort of do that. So I am genuinely excited about sort of where we're at. I'm excited about where we are at as an organisation. If I reflect back on probably doing something like this a year ago, it was early days. We'd just done workforce planning. We sort of knew what we wanted to do. The difference now is the fact we're doing it. And so we're a more confident organisation. We've got a clear sense as to where we're trying to get to. And I think when you're clear about where you're trying to get to, then you can sort of like you get there, or at least you get most of the way there. But when you're looking at things and you're discussing theories and concepts, you sort of like you get nowhere because there's like loads of that going on all the time. So Chris asked me to sort of like do some provocations and some provoking. So I'll try and do that. Very much reflective, I suppose, of where my head is at this particular moment in time. So please don't read anything into it. There is no criticism implied of anything, but I do think the system has to shift and it has to adjust, and it has to adjust quickly. And we need to be urgent about where we're trying to get to. And if we're not urgent, then we're not going to get there. And so I think that's our opportunity, but it's also our threat. Teresa talked about the numbers. 250K is the shortfall in finance, tech and business. Those aren't the numbers. The numbers actually is every single person who works in our economy and the skills that they need to be successful in that economy. And the reason for that and the rationale for that is about productivity, but it's more than that. It's about productivity and it's about participation. We have an aging workforce. We have to enable people to participate in that workforce, and technology, AI, enables us to do that. And so I think when we're thinking about the challenges that we've got construction, we've got green economy, we've got digital moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. We have got a whole bunch of disruptions going on at this moment in time, and jobs are changing. And the tasks that our people are going to do are changing. And that's in the vet system, it's in our teachers and our trainers, but it's across the economy. And we need to be comfortable with that uncertainty because we don't know where it's going to take us. We don't have this luxury anymore of being able to be clear about what these tasks are that people are going to have to do, and therefore to create this perfect system that then sort of trains people for that. Those days are gone. some elements of it that are there. But, you know, this idea of the fact that there are skills for everybody, purpose 3 skills, cross-industry, cross-occupation, those skills are increasingly valued by industry as being the skills that they most want to see. And there's this sort of challenge that you get, which is industry sometimes saying, on the one hand, I want to have somebody who is job ready. No, I don't think that's realistic. It never was realistic. You know, the education training system has a responsibility to generate people to a level of training so that they can then participate in industry, but they don't and cannot necessarily get somebody all the way to this idea of job ready. And I think we have to be really clear about where does education and training go and finish, and where does industry have to step in and step up? We're seeing across the board that industry's investment in training is reducing. So they're training less, 20% less over the last 10 years, at the very moment in time when their investment in training needs to be increasing, because skills are changing, and the requirement on industry to be able to invest in the context education of their individuals has never been greater. We know that lifelong learning is going to become one of the fundamental skill sets that we need to have, curiosity across the workforce as we go through it. So how do we reset our systems to do that? How does industry promote that and encourage that within their workspaces? I think we talk about lifelong learning as if it's something that happens in education. What we're really talking about, surely, is about becoming a learning economy, whereby organizations, the good organizations that will thrive will be the ones that encourage learning within their organizations, in their culture, in the processes that they are effectively reinforcing, and in the time that they give their people to actually do that. Those will be the ones that respond and derive the benefit of what's happening in the economy more generally as things are moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So I think the challenge for VET is this amazing opportunity, but also, if we don't take it, the reality of the fact that we become increasingly more redundant and irrelevant. And so I suppose provocation number 1 is, can VET reinvent itself fast enough to actually take its position leading the development of the Australian workforce? Every JSC is different, and we've all got different challenges that we have to have. And so, you know, I think about the FSO, you know, we are focused on finance, tech and business. And when we describe that to ourselves, you know, those are occupations that sit in finance, that sit in technology, that sit in the business sector. But actually the other part of it is this idea of skills that sit across the economy. So when we talk about things like generalist skills, we mean the skills that everybody needs to have. And those are the skills that industry tell us all of the time. When we focus our work, you know, we drive, or we use the feedback that we've had from industry and the sector about where the pain points are greatest. So, for example, we talk about declining confidence and relevance by industry in some of the qualifications that we are responsible for in finance, tech and business. The need for relevant employment and learning pathways, because the two are not matched up in the space, definitely in technology and becoming increasingly so in finance. There is this need for skills in our economy, employability skills, generalist skills, whatever you want to call them, but that is consistently the thing that industry wants to see. Those are digital skills, they're AI skills, they're cyber skills, but they're also skills like teamwork, communication, curiosity. These are the skills that will enable people to be able to transition from one job to the other as jobs start to shift and change. So there's a real demand for that. And yet within our system, we haven't really heroed those skills. We haven't really developed them in a way that actually emphasizes their importance. And we haven't found a way necessarily of making sure that those skills are being delivered consistently across this amazing network, which is the VET network and its training packages. Fragmentation gets us every single time. States and territories, within the federal government, within the VET sector, we are operating in silos. We're not operating together. We could be so much more efficient. We could move so much quicker. We could do so much with what we have if we were to learn to be able to centralize, concentrate, and work together on things that enable us all to go forwards at the right level, is my definite sense. So the provocation I have here is sort of like, when I think about JSCs, we're all doing different things. I think the thing that I often ask myself as we think about, how well set are we in this world that we're in, is are we prioritizing the right opportunities to be able to meet the strategic shifting workforce needs? Because we're operating as 10 JSCs, operating relatively independently, but increasingly in a more coordinated way. But it's not easy to do that, as we know, to coordinate these things. We don't make progress unless we work together. Like, back to fragmentation, this is a team sport. This is about educators and trainers. It's about industry. It's about state governments, and it's about federal government. And we all have to come together if we're going to be able to address the challenges that are strategic by nature. And so we have to think about how to promote and actually deliver innovation in collaboration so that we are effectively able to do that. Where you do see those collaborations coming together well, then amazing results are achieved. But where people operate within, or organizations operate within their stovepipes, then it's just another stovepiped initiative. How many pilots have we seen that put a bunch of money into supporting marginalized communities, and the number that they get to is like 50, and then it stops? Like, that's not a good use of money, and it's not a good use of learning. And so I think there's real opportunities around how we can move beyond effectively the silos and actually collaborate and work together to address the challenges that we've got. So my third provocation is are we ready to do that? Are we ready to move beyond silos? Are we ready to share, to co-design, to co-deliver, and actually think about the system as a whole? And then the last point I'd go to is that whatever you do, it needs to be sort of like practical and reasonable. And we know that there are a whole bunch of issues out there. There's like research after research after research that talks about all the things that we need to do. But what we have to do is to move from analysis, paralysis, and into action, and to identify the things that we are going to do and to do them. And the biggest challenge is taking that step, because it's never perfect. And the hardest thing is to recognize that it's never going to be perfect. But the most important thing is to do something. And if I was to reflect on my 30 years in the military, the most important thing that you can ever do when you're in those uncertain environments is to do something. Doesn't matter what you do, but you must do something, and then you respond to what happens next. And I think that's the place that we're at now, is that if we're serious about this, if we're serious about taking advantage of our opportunities, we need to do something. And one of the things that we're doing, this is now the FSO, is the accelerator for AI that we announced at the National Forum a couple of weeks ago. And we got to the accelerator idea because we've been like scratching our heads for like 3 years trying to work out what implementation, promotion, and monitoring looks like across a 4,000 organization RTO network with 7 states and territories. And like, we could never work out how to do it. And so when we did the vet workforce study, we got to this idea of a network of excellence. And then sort of Jenny savaged me and told me that it was sort of like, not a completely bad idea, but not a completely good idea. But the thing she told me, which was really, really helpful, was like, it's got to be focused on something. You can't just sort of have another idea that says, let's collaborate when you don't know what you're collaborating. So that then took us to the idea of let's be focused on a thing. And then it took us to the idea of acceleration, because there are lots of accelerators out there, by the way, globally. But the point about the accelerator is that it says what it is we intend to do on the packet. We want to come together with the right partners, and we want to do things quickly. And it's the idea of a problem that is recognized and in need of support, and the ability to be able to respond to that in a partnership sort of focused way. And so the accelerator is all about working with people who want to share, who want to be a part of trying to fix that, so that we can collectively move forwards in the right way. So I'm very keen for anybody that's out there who wishes to be a part of that accelerator, either as an individual or as an organization. Like, we are open doors, and we really want to pick up your experience and then help to showcase that. The FSO is an orchestrator. We don't do things in that way. That's the work that you guys do. But we are an orchestrator, and we can help to shine a light and to bring people together around something. So that for us then becomes quite an important part of, I think, of where we go to. And I think almost in terms of if it works as a pilot, we'll use that as a vehicle to sort of progress the other things that we do in our space as the FSO. And to remind you what those things are, it's an absolute focus on those generalist skill sets, which are around skills needed by everybody, cyber, digital, AI, generalist employability skill, as well as then the more specialist piece that can come out of it. And then whatever we do, we aim to do at scale by working with and through the state governments. So our accelerator is our vehicle to do things quickly and to do it with other people. So hopefully in there is something that might provoke. But once again, thank you very much indeed, for the kind introduction, the kind invitation, and love working with you all and looking forward to doing more as we go forwards. Chris, in fact, not Chris, it's over to Alyssa to pick up some of those themes, perhaps.
Thanks, PK. And I definitely agree that we have a lot of analysis paralysis and well understand the problem by now. I think I 100% agree that collaboration is the way forward, and we need to be testing and trialing and moving into doing. So what I'm going to talk about is some of the initiatives that BKI have underway to start tackling some of these problems and what we're piloting and testing internally. I want to bring it back, though, firstly, to our own vet workforce. I think we often tend to talk about the industry space and the skill gaps, and I'll get to that in a minute, but we need to start with our own workforces internally if we're going to get the right skills coming through to be able to deliver on that. And so we're looking internally around a whole range of AI initiatives, and we have a whole suite of programs underway to think about how we can, use AI for RPL, use AI for assessment generation, verification tools, use AI in our day-to-day business. And we're starting to talk more about how we use AI as part of our learning and teaching. And one of the things that I often see that is missed in some of these conversations when we start to think about how businesses are transforming is also how learning's transforming. AI is going to change the way that people actually learn. We already know this, we're seeing it all the time. And often our conversations sit around the peripheral of that, looking at how industry needs are changing and how we can upskill people for that. But we need to look internally and think about what are the actual pedagogical shifts that are going to occur, and where does TAFE add value in that new world? Because we absolutely do, and we know that we're really well positioned to lead in that space. We have the applied learning, we know that we can have skilled educators that can work with people, and the role of those educators is going to become even more prominent. We're not going to need people to derive content and to facilitate conversations and those things, but where we are going to need people is that hands-on, on-the-job, personalised experiences, and really thinking how we draw on the analytics and the personalisation that AI can provide for learning to add an extra layer of value and something that people want to come to TAFE for and to help to achieve those outcomes. And I really think we need to start having conversations around what does that mean? What does it mean for our students and the way that they digest information, but also what does it mean for our educators, and how do we start to upskill them to use these tools to understand the data ethics, but also to really truly understand that digital pedagogy and confidently deliver in this new world. Part of that, of course, is what we talked about around curriculum and co-design with industry, and that need to really work hand in hand. And TAFE, again, is really well positioned to do this. We work across this in so many different parts of what we do already, and we know what's happening on the ground in those industries. So being able to draw on that, bring it to life, bring it into the classroom, but think about it not just from a skill set point of view in terms of what we're educating people for, but also think about it from a pedagogical standpoint in how are we delivering the right kind of learning to meet those needs. One of the projects we did recently was looking at the DigComp framework. It was a piece of work we did with the FSO earlier this year. And as part of that, we surveyed a whole range of employers across a range of business, finance, and IT sectors to understand where they were seeing the needs of digital skills in AI and cyber. And it was really, really clear that there was an entire workforce need. There was need to upskill at every single different level, whether that was just being familiar with tools, using tools, knowing how to use them safely, or whether it was at the more higher scale technical end. It was quite varied, but there was definitely skill gaps across all of it. One of the challenges we have, though, is getting people to come in to do generalist type digital skilling training. We know this, we've seen it plenty of times, and we understand this. While as educators, we get really, really excited around that generalist skills. If we don't link it to the efficiency dividends that the industries are looking for and actually link it to how that productivity gain is going to be achieved, it becomes a little bit redundant. So we really need to be thinking about what are those generalist skills? How do we align them to the dividends in terms of efficiencies that our industries are actually looking for? And then how do we start to upskill in a way that gives tangible, skilled, applied outcomes and benefits, while also building that deep foundational knowledge and technical requirements and transitional skills at the same time. And I think that's a piece of work that we can, as TAFE, really do. We've seen it across a whole range of different work and pilots that we've run. And we know that when we bring in industry to have those conversations and start to really understand what it is that they're trying to gain in those productivity spaces, we can actually deliver on that, and we can embed those technologies at that ground level to really give meaningful outcomes. And it was that sort of drove us to the self-accreditation pilot, which Andrew's going to explain in a bit more detail, and also some of the products that we've developed. But the part that I wanted to draw on around that is we could see the need to have a much more flexible qualification and something that we could build rapidly and transition and really draw on that co-curricular and design skills, thinking about our industries. We had really strong industry partners, as well as other TAFEs and universities involved in the design of the qualification. And we have the capability in TAFEs to do this and to design curriculum and design it quickly and rapidly. Within 4 months, we'd developed an advanced diploma. And in doing so, we were able to really think about different ways of learning and how we could bring in that applied research and understand the industry skills at a different level, and develop a product that was really responsive to the localized needs of the industry sectors we were dealing with, but also thinking of it as a national scale, and to bring those two together in a way that has tangible, meaningful benefits for industry. And through that pilot, we were able to develop really quickly. We had to develop to a competency-based model because it was an ASPA pilot. But I think one of the learnings from that is we do need more innovative forms of curriculum, and we do need to think about, as a sector, what it is we're developing for who and why, and have a bit more scope and flexibility in how we tackle that to be able to deliver the right outcomes at the right time if we're going to meet those digital skilling needs in a responsive, fast, and furious way that also allows for those tools to develop over time. We also need investment. So while we collaborated with great industry partners, everybody was donating their time to this, and the pilot itself wasn't funded. So if we really want to be able to accelerate pilots like this that showcase our capability as TAFEs, which we do have and we've demonstrated we have, it needs commitment and it needs investment from industry and from government to enable these pilots so that we can test, we can move away from the analysis part of what we do, defining the problem, and actually have more of these rapid pilots so that we can bring to life these ideas and showcase not just what we can do, but what's possible, and probably ideas that we haven't even thought of yet. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm happy to answer questions, but I'm going to hand to Andrew, who's going to explain some of those products in a little bit more detail. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you, Alyssa. So I guess a couple of the projects that I've been working on over the last couple of years are around data, AI, and digital innovation. So a lot of what you've just spoken about before and what PK has touched on, we've tried to really drive home that need of, let's not do the same old, and let's try and do things a bit differently and try to address things differently. So the first thing that we did was that we went through the VRQA to develop up a data analytics program. And this was just prior to AI kind of coming into its own. So we knew it was coming, or it was just about there. And what we looked at was two programs around data analytics. So around the Cert 4 and Data Foundations and the Diploma of Data Analytics. And so what we saw was that there was a lack of these data skills in our IT training packages. There was a little bit in the business one, but for us to really create a really harmonious product that addressed a skill set across many different industry sectors, we would need to almost Frankenstein the Cert 4 in business and the Diploma of IT together to make that happen. And really, you would be sort of shortchanging either side. So we felt that a standalone program was needed. We engaged across a number of different disciplines to make that happen. So we had members from the healthcare sector, telecoms, education, that fed into what we wanted to do. And so, coming out of that, we've got a program that sits where, we've got students that will be going through a program to be able to understand business problems and then solve for the right problem. So that's building on the critical thinking and the problem solving skills that we have spoken about. An application of the actual tech skills. So looking at things like, the different data platforms. So whether it's, vendor products like Microsoft's Fabric, Power BI, right through to Salesforce, Tableau, etc. The tools and language, we weren't specific around the actual languages or types of languages that needed to go into these courses because it changes. I mean, we've just seen how much AI has changed over the last 2 years. So we can't have a very prescriptive program, particularly in tech, because it just then slows down or renders it unusable in the future as things change. So, but what we wanted to make sure that we did do was call out the use of AI and for students to understand the difference between, say, AI and machine learning, because they are two different things. But lately, AI has kind of been the umbrella term for a lot of that kind of stuff. So we wanted to make sure that there was a distinction between the two and that students understood the difference between and how you would use one or the other. The reason for, who might go into these sorts of programs, we looked at really trying to have both, the school leavers, the young people that want to build their digital data literacy skills. So to understand how data can be used or for good and for bad. But also if they've got an interest in AI or, in that data science space, this is a really good starting point to get into that. We've seen that perhaps the university space, they've got more programs that have become more hands-on with what they try to do. But I think, as tools and technologies mature and become easier to use, we can actually move back into the space that higher ed has, moved into, such as like data science and analytics and the like. So that gives us the ability to both have a program that can address the people that don't have a lot of experience, but also then the people that are looking to upskill or reskill, so the mature age workforce, and they can pick up the professional skills that they need in this space. The other program which we worked on is the Advanced Diploma of Digital Innovation, which Alyssa spoke about before, the ASQA pilot, self-accredited 4 months. It was a whirlwind to work through, and I've got to say it was an experience to be part of. And I think, it just proves that we can move quickly in a space. And I think with the right mechanisms around it, you can solve problems pretty quickly and have something that is accredited for students to go through. We before the pilot, we looked at whether or not we would try to address, sports tech, health tech, fintech, are these sorts of areas that we wanted to get into. But the innovation program struck a chord because it kind of, to use the AI piece before, it umbrellaed everything, and it allowed for us to have a program that doesn't really matter what sector you're solving a problem for. It can go either way anyway. And so what we wanted to try and do was to have a mix of innovation, entrepreneurial, and enterprise skills with key digital competencies. And so this allowed us to kind of build the program out so that it looked like a year-long capstone project or a startup year, if you like. So it takes students through the innovation journey. So they're really being able to stretch and build upon their design thinking skills, the critical thinking, experimentation and validation of ideas, which I think is something that gets lost in the TAFE sector sometimes, because we tend to go with follow the bouncing ball, A to B to C to D, and then you're job ready. But this time around, we're looking at, okay, we don't actually know what the answer is. So let's explore, look at it, experiment with an idea, and then validate it and make sure that it makes sense. And so that was kind of like one of the main drivers for what we wanted to do coming out of the program. Obviously, with the digital competency piece, it's about the digital tools out there and what industry is using and how they use it. And look, AI is going to be a big part of what we do in this course. It's going to be the piece that helps move the process along a lot quicker, because students are able to iterate and ideate a lot quicker through their problem solving. And these are just skills that both students of the future, they're going to come into these courses having already used a lot of AI because that's just what they're used to. But also it allows for maybe the more mature students to be able to, practice and try what this looks like across a range of different circumstances. The why we did it Well, we did an EOI for Asquith, so that's why we did it. But it was a really great opportunity to test some ideas that we've long held within BKI around, how do we try to expose students to different ways of doing things. So one of the things that we wanted to do was to, allow students to build that innovation toolbox, if you like. So they can have a deep technical skill because they've done, Cert 3, Cert 4 diploma in field X, but they're really missing that enterprise innovation skill. So, how do we make them more employable in the workplace? So that was something that we wanted to try and do through the advanced diploma. And an idea that we have for this project is that it's a cross-discipline piece. So you don't have to come in with a tech background. You can pick up some of the tech skills through the course. We want to have, let's say agriculture students come into it and work with tech students to solve problems for agri-tech, for example. So I think they're the sorts of things that we really wanted to try and do. And, it feeds into what PK was talking about of, digital being across a number of different sectors. And so a program like this really allows for different sectors or different disciplines to pick it up and really apply a different mindset to try and problem solve for the problems in the future. And I suppose one final thing is the challenges which Alyssa mentioned before, or around is the self-funded piece. With the advanced diploma, we did self-fund that program, and I think it does require some sort of innovation funding or some sort of contribution across the board to be able to make these things happen in the future. And I think the other bit is the engagement with the state and federal bodies around how and what this looks like once it's accredited, because the other challenge that we have on the other side of the fence is that we can write the course, but we need it to be funded so that it's accessible for students moving forward. We can't have these programs just sitting on the shelf waiting to be taught when, as a fee-for-service program, nobody's going to enroll into it because it's too expensive. So they're the sorts of conversations that we need to have to be able to make these things happen and to enable students to pick them up in a far more reasonable time. So I'll pause there and I'll throw back to Chris.
Thanks, Andrew. So many questions. I think it's really interesting to hear you say there, Andrew, that you had these are long held ideas. So TAFEs have these initiatives, these ideas that are there that we are yet to activate. And I think funding and policy settings just play such a role. It's not innovation just in the products and services that you guys are asked to do. It's how does government and industry help activate that by innovating the way that we think about funding and promoting this stuff. I think that's one of the really large takeaways, that this EOI that you modestly said that you responded to, and that was a trigger for this, resulted in a brilliant product for the market. And it's like, how do we just activate more of that? How do we replicate that more? Remarkable stuff. I think just in the interest of time, I think we're going to take longer for a discussion, but there's some questions that have come through, and I want to kind of make sure that we give some air to those. So Teresa, I might just sort of incorporate those into the discussion if that's okay with you. Just a sidebar, there's no slides at all today. We've actually just decided on having a conversation, which I know is kind of mind-blowing, but such is the sort of, I guess you call it sort of contrary to the subject itself. We're just having a chat, no technology involved, except Zoom. So PK, like, I love this question. It's one that I was sort of going to ask, and Erin said, given the accelerating pace of change, do you believe vocational education should shift away from large, comprehensive training packages toward more agile, modular skill sets that can be clustered, delivered flexibly to meet learner and employer needs? And it's obviously something that gets spoken about a lot through the JSCs, and I'm sure BK has a position on this as well. I think funding probably comes into this to some degree, as it always does, whether they are or aren't funded. But just your view on that, PK, to start with.
That's like 1,000%. These are this is what industry want. They want, there's two parts to it. One is, industry want these skills to be invested in, and the other part is that learners want to participate in that type of training. And so if we're serious about this, we'll be clear about what these skills are. We would accredit them, we'd make them accessible, and we would get in behind it, and we'd find a way of making them stackable. It's not difficult, we can do it. Funny enough, South Australia, if anyone was at the forum, talked about the fact that they now have the ability to be able to accredit skill sets, and they're going to do that. And so I think that really does take us into the right place. But unless we start to move beyond this idea of industrial era qualifications that take people a bunch of time to complete, and that that are not necessarily as valued as they might be, then our vet system will continue to sort of lie. It'll be in the past. And so I think it becomes an absolutely essential part of how vet needs to evolve. The idea of the fact that we can have a two-tier system which has got some different gears that can be responsive to the needs of industry and the economy, that's where we need to get to. And accrediting and being able to accredit those types of skill sets is absolutely fundamental.
The two-speed thing is interesting, PK. I think the stuff that FSO is responsible for carries less risk than some of the obviously the more traditional trades, and it feels like if we can experiment with a two-speed economy, this is kind of it. This is the place that we can try it with sort of dialed down risk in terms of those skill sets. Are you sort of hearing signals from the market, Alyssa, Andrew, that that's the sort of product and service that students want and students need, and specifically the industry as well?
Look, I'll jump in first. I think so. I think there's two parts to it, though. I think, we have a responsibility to create a career pathway for students, and sometimes that does mean actually a fundamentally a longer piece, and that might be, a qualification that does take a little bit longer. But for those that are upskilling or changing career, yeah, they don't need the whole qual, and that's where a skill set or pieces might work. I'm sort of coming to a conclusion over time around, as an example, around digital marketing or marketing and comms. I think that in itself is perhaps a program where skill sets might work really well, because it's, different parts of different role or, applications, vendors, those sorts of things that people would be looking to pick up, rather than, doing a full course around that. So, I personally think that that's something that we could explore, versus say, doing accounting, where, you kind of need to know everything from end to end on that.
I'll just add, I agree on what you're saying, but I definitely think there's different needs and different types of qualifications and structures that work better or are more relevant to different types of cohorts and different types of industry sectors. And you mentioned traditional trades, and then there's an area where I think in some of those it does make sense to have the qualification based and the types of delivery models we have. Yes, we could do it differently and better, of course, but I think in some of those areas that longer qualification and being able to really build those skills to those sorts of levels makes sense. I also think we need to start to disaggregate the types of learners that we're bringing in and start to think about different types of structures for different types of learners. So what we would see coming through our vet and schools types programs and at those sorts of levels versus those year 13s and what people coming straight out of school into their first level of job, the needs for them and the structure that they need is going to be very, very different to an upskiller or a reskiller. And we still have this view of the AQF in this hierarchical order that you start at the bottom and you move your way up, rather than looking at this matrix approach of how you may, build up skills as you have your career starting out, but then you may transition, stack on, move between, go back and forwards as you grow your skill sets, and that makes sense. And until we shift our mindsets a little bit around some of that, I think we're going to be locked into these pathway structures that don't quite give a lot of these people what they need to take those next steps in their lives.
Yeah, I think you got a couple of love heart responses there, Alyssa, so congrats. I think it's interesting when we sort of talk about this speed, urgency, pace stuff, Patrick, and I think one of the things there is, like, I think Alyssa touched on, like, a changing of mindset. So I think you said like 2 years or something, you've been talking about how we can increase speed, how we can make people more aware of the urgency required here. So I guess what do you see as being like the core reason that we haven't made that sort of step, that change there? Like, is it mindset? Is it just the complexity of the system? Is it structural?
I think the complexity of the system is one thing. It's the fact that there is no one part of the system which owns the authority to be able to make those decisions. So you go to places like, Victoria, I think, had that ability. WA, obviously, with their own ability to sort of do regulation. And South Australia have been able to do something with legislation. And so I think the problem is there are so many rules that are in play that it's then difficult for people to be clear about sort of where it is they should start. And then, of course, I think you have the qualifications reform piece, which is reflective really of that last conversation, which is we have to get to a point whereby we recognise that a one size fits all approach is no longer appropriate, and you've got to take a lot of people on that journey. So if you then start to think about the industrial relations dimensions of some of those qualifications and what then has to be unpacked there, then I think you've got another layer of complexity. So when I think about how do you break through that, I actually think that AI is the Trojan horse that helps you to break through that. And with that, then you take through other skills that go with that. And when we think about something like AI, it's not just AI digital skills, it's AI digital skills, it's digital skills, it's cyber skills, and it's the human skills that you need to have to be able to process information in a different way. And so there's so much that can get sort of like packed up there. And I think that AI is becoming this thing that people almost for the first time recognize as being something that needs to be treated seriously and differently. And that, I hope, is the thing that can help to sort of reset the system so that we can move faster where we need to.
Yeah, sure. Kevin has asked a handful of questions, all great. So I want to kind of get to one of Kevin's questions. I think there's a thread here that talks a little bit about inclusion and how we can make sure that this opportunity is evenly distributed. And I think that it's one of the things that TAFE really cares about and has at its core. So how are you kind of thinking about that, Alyssa, Andrew, in terms of like the products and services that you kind of developing or considering developing that might be stacked in that idea deck? How are you thinking about how you can reach the most people in the community, but also specifically those sort of marginalized and diverse kind of learners?
I'll jump in and then I'll hand it to Andrew. There's probably a few ways that you can take this question and sort of think about inclusion in this space. The one thing I would want to really highlight is I think AI enables inclusion more so than what we've ever seen. It gives us the power to really personalize the learning experience. And already we're seeing a lot of adaptive learning models, a lot of tools that help people that may not have been able to access learning, adjust the learning to suit their needs and or get the help that they need to move through that. And it allows us as educators to really tailor those learning experience to so many different cohorts and be able to adjust the curriculum or adjust the learning or adjust the assessments and to really bring it to what's needed for there. And it does that at a scale we've never seen before. So I think the opportunity around inclusions are massive and it's at a scale that we've never seen. Have we fully tapped into it and done it as well as we can? No, not yet. But it is definitely the opportunity. And it also allows for more inclusive, potentially stacking of qualifications. If you've got an AI tool that helps you identify what your learning goals are, what you want to do as a career, what you need in terms of a formalized qualifications or license, but also then what skills you need. And you can allow AI to help you navigate your journey, help you time it, help you structure your learning, help you be in the right space at the right time to be able to do that, but also help manage the work-life balance you need around it and the economical side of it. There's so many opportunities that we just haven't really fully unlocked yet, but we will see that coming.
Andrew, anything to add?
How do you follow that?
You don't have to. You don't have to. Alyssa got more love hearts. So
yeah, look,
big ask.
No, I think just the inclusion. I think free TAFE is a wonderful thing that really enables people to participate and engage in education. And as long as we are doing what we can to make sure that our spaces are safe and for everyone to participate, and we can do that, we're going on the right track.
Okay, we're getting towards time, but I think there's enough time for a couple more questions. I think there's one here. There's a sort of a thread that's happening in the Q&A around how AI can sort of coexist with micro credentials or credentialing as a thing, and also this kind of idea of lifelong learning as like a national policy. And I think PK, you talked a bit about that learning economy, like how do we move to this sort of like we're in this stance where learning is just a thing we prioritize in Australia. Any sort of comments on that? Any kind of final thoughts on that, PK?
I just wanted to come back with one other comment on the last conversation.
Sure.
I sort of I want to make sure that we recognise that the vet system is TAFE and it's the independence.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like everybody's got to come into the middle, and they've got to like move forwards together. So I think I just want to sort of like lay that point out there, because there is so much of the training that is done through the independents that isn't going to go away. So that becomes an important part of the ecosystem. I think the lifelong learning thing is really interesting in terms of, you know, where we go to there. And I think, to my mind, the opportunity for VET is around the curation of resources that are useful to companies, particularly small to medium-sized companies, so that they can access unique, small size packages of training that they can then use within their workplace to help make it easier for them to train. And if you go to like small business, they are crying out for something that is designed for their particular needs with their particular sort of challenges. And I think that's where the opportunity is being bold enough to take a step away from traditional qualifications, and to package things up in a way that makes them more accessible to companies and to individuals. And I think that's the opportunity and the need as we stare into this next sort of 10 years or so.
Okay, Teresa, time for one more. I know you're very keen on wrapping up on time.
I am. Look, maybe if you did a little, just a quick summary there, Chris, and because we're at 2:56, so if you want to kind of summarize that. And there are a few questions we've answered along the way. I think they'll keep coming though. So
yeah, I mean, you know, it's great to see questions come
Yeah.
through, and some of the comments have been extraordinarily generous and kind. I think it's to me, this is a really important conversation. I work in a technology company. I'm constantly hiring and constantly looking at sources that we can find talent from. And like I said up top, like increasingly it's clear to me with the way that vocational education is set up that applied learning and knowledge in terms of AI specifically is actually one of the things that we value more than we thought we would. And I think that's a call to all TAFEs and all RTOs, that there's an opportunity here, like employers like us, and we're relatively small in the grand scheme of things, that we need people qualified in this stuff. I really think that it starts from a digital baseline, a foundation where you get digital skills. It has to. It's how you stack up. And it's just incredible to see the likes of the programs that BK has developed. Brave, courageous, it seems, and you know, it's sad to think that they may have been sat on the shelf forever had that EOI not have happened. So, you know, we need to urge more sort of innovation in the way that we think about funding and promoting and activating the likes of those ideas. So, big thanks to you, Teresa. Big thanks to the panelists, Alyssa, Andrew, and PK, as ever. Provocative PK, thank you. And thanks for everyone for joining and participating and engaging. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you to you too for some excellent moderation. Thank you again to our participants in the audience. Great questions. And Patrick, Alyssa, Andrew, that was amazing. There's so much positive feedback and people just want to do this again. So obviously it was a winner. Yeah, fantastic. Our next event is on the 22nd of October, and we will discuss tertiary harmonisation and the importance of shared data standards. So another one that is relevant to data and important to our ongoing conversations about harmonisation. But thank you again today to all of our panel and to ReadyTech and Chris for pulling this together, and our wonderful panelists, Alyssa, Andrew and Patrick. Thank you again, and see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.